Hi, thank you so much for coming into your visit today. My name is Adriana Valencia. I am a registered dietitian and certified diabetes care and education specialist. Thanks for coming in. I know that you recently got diagnosed with type 2 and there's a lot of information that you're sorting through. And thank you so much for filling out this questionnaire here. You have really great questions. We're going to go through all of them today. The first one that you had written down was weight loss. So we'll talk about weight loss ideas. You had questions about exercise, reading a nutrition label, and also about glucerna. So we're going to address all of your concerns today and kind of touch on all those topics. So the first thing that you wrote here was your question about weight loss. Now, losing weight, I always say, is hard to do. And the reason why that is because you have to figure out something that works for you. There really isn't a one size fits all type of diet or change that works. Typically, it's a good idea to kind of look at what you're doing currently with your eating habits and kind of think of ways that you can modify that. So let me give you an example. If you typically on your way to work or taking your kids to school, you stop in the morning and get a Starbucks and you get some kind of specialty coffee. There you could be drinking anywhere between 200 and 300 calories easily. So that might be something to kind of look at and think, okay, this is something that I can modify if I'm looking for some weight loss. So always kind of look at what you're doing. And from there, we can make ideas and goals based on your current habits. Typically, it might be a good place to start and kind of think about when you're having your lunch and dinner, especially, really considering adding in more non-starchy vegetables. Now, I know you've already had a little bit of education in the hospital, so I'll just kind of refresh your memory. Non-starchy vegetables essentially are any vegetables other than corn, peas, any kind of potato, or winter squash like butternut or acorn, for example. So anytime you sit down and have your lunch and dinner, you don't need to really change what you're eating. You can still enjoy that meal that you're having with your family. But if you really try and have half of your plate with the non-starchy vegetables, that's ideal. That's going to help you cut back your carbohydrates and your calories of the meal overall without you necessarily completely changing your diet. So for example, if you come home and there's lasagna and there's garlic bread and there's salad, lasagna is everybody's favorite, right? You can still sit down and enjoy that meal with your family. Instead of having a really large piece of lasagna, for example, if you have your plate with half of that beautiful salad, that's going to automatically reduce your portion of the lasagna, which will help reduce your calories and your carbohydrates, which can help with the weight loss that you're looking to see. So really striving for adding those non-starchy vegetables in can really help you with the overall calorie reduction. Now, those vegetables don't have to be anything fancy or organic. You can keep it simple. You can do frozen bags of non-starchy vegetables like broccoli or cauliflower. Bagged salad works great as well. So it doesn't have to be anything that you spend a lot more time preparing in the kitchen. So that's my first kind of tip to give you for the weight loss. The other thing that you can consider doing, which can be a little bit tedious, is using a tracker on your phone to help you assess where you can make changes. Kind of like I first mentioned with the Starbucks, right? So if you use a tracker, it will help you see where you can make modifications in your eating habits. There are so many different trackers you can use on your phone that are free. Some of them even have applications where you can scan the food label in, so it just pops right into the app. So there's a lot of different ones, like MyFitnessPal is one that's pretty popular. You can also use something like called Fujicate, which is one that I like. There are a variety of different ones, so whatever works for you. Also, you can use just good old pen and paper, right? The point of this diary is for you to look at it and just see where the changes can be made. So that can be a powerful tool for some people, and you can do it for a week or two to see where those calorie changes can be made to help with this weight loss that you want to see. Another thing to kind of think about is if you're skipping meals often, that can really lead to overeating later. A lot of us have really busy schedules, and I hear often, just as you had mentioned to me earlier, that you sometimes will skip lunch because you get so busy at work, right? So if you eat breakfast at 8:30, for example, and you miss your lunch and you don't eat until 3 o'clock, what do you think is going to happen when you sit down to eat that 3 o'clock meal? You're going to end up overeating. We've all done it before. So really, if you try and avoid skipping meals, that's going to help keep you on track with your calorie goals and your carb goals. If you have a very busy work schedule, like I mentioned, skipping lunch can be pretty often for people who have a hectic day. I always encourage people to consider putting an alarm in their Outlook calendar or in their phone just to kind of remind them, to prompt them to have something to eat to avoid overeating later. Now, you also had a question about snacking in the weight loss. Now, snacking is usually recommended if you're going more than 4 hours in between a meal, just to kind of help you to keep your appetite at bay. It's not necessary in any way. It's just more to help keep you from overdoing it at that next meal. So for example, if you have the breakfast early at 8:30, you weren't going to eat lunch until 3, having a snack in between would be a good idea to keep you from eating a larger 3 o'clock meal in that example. So that's a really good question about the weight loss. I know we went through a lot of different topics, so just kind of think about what would really work for you and your lifestyle based on how much weight loss you'd like to see. Now remember, a healthy weight loss is about 1 to 2 pounds a week. Sometimes you hear about people following these kind of like these fad diets, something like a keto diet, or they're doing a gluten-free diet, or they're doing paleo. Those are, everybody's dietary needs are different, but usually those diets where you eliminate food groups aren't something that people can sustain for a long period of time. So really working on a sustainable weight loss is, I would say, the most important thing to help keep you on track and help you with this 1 to 2 pound a week goal, kind of keeping that in mind. Now, your second question is about exercise. I see on the questionnaire you wrote that you currently aren't doing any type of exercise, but it's something that you wanted to incorporate in. So think about what activities you enjoy doing. Maybe that could be hiking with your family, going for a swim, golfing. You want to try and make the exercise enjoyable for you. Before you start any kind of exercise routine, it is important to check with your primary care provider or one of your physicians just to make sure that you're safe for activity. Once you've been cleared for that, adding in the activity would be great to do for your overall health. It does help get blood sugars down. It's also great for heart health, mental health, helps get your GI system going. There are a lot of benefits to activity. When you're first starting out, you really want to consider thinking about when it would work for your schedule. So think about your whole week and what it usually looks like, and think about what days you can start going to do even just a walk outside. So an example, if you know that Wednesdays are your lighter days at work, you can say like, okay, Wednesdays I'll go for a little walk, 15 minutes around my block around 10 o'clock. Or if you have a lunchtime meeting that you can listen to maybe on some headphones, you can always try and maybe go outside and go for a walk during this lunchtime meeting. Adding an exercise is a great goal. It definitely will help you with the weight loss that you want to see and will also help with the blood sugars. Just kind of thinking of when you want to add that in is typically the hardest part for most people, is just kind of getting it into your routine. But just kind of start slow with that and start with realistic goals. So saying, I'm going to walk 15 minutes 3 times a week is a really good place to start, right? So that's a good thing to do. Also consider somebody in your house if they wanted to participate in this activity with you. Having a buddy is always a good idea to keep you accountable for the exercise as well. Kind of keeps you honest and on track. Another tool can be getting some kind of watch. There's a lot of different watches available out there, like an iPhone watch. There's Android watches. There's also Fitbits that you can purchase that aren't as expensive now as they used to be when they first came out. And these can help you monitor your steps and even give you some reminders to stand and walk. So that's another kind of powerful tool that you can maybe try to help you get that exercise in, which is a really good goal to start. Now, the third topic you wanted to talk about was nutrition labels. That's a very good question. And I do have some here in the office that I kind of keep to show. So when you look at a nutrition label, we'll do some raisins here to start. There's really only a couple things I want you to focus on. So you see here that there's serving size, it's in bold, and then it has next to it, the serving size would be in this example is a 1/4 cup. Okay, so just to give you an idea, this is what a 1/4 cup looks like. These are some raisins, okay? So a 1/4 cup of raisins, if we go all the way down to total carbohydrates, is 33 grams of carbohydrate, okay? That's really all that I want you to focus on for now, since we're just getting started. I don't want you to worry about these percents on the side here, and I don't want you to worry too much about the dietary fiber or the sugar on the bottom. We'll talk a little bit more about those. So for example, if I ate a 1/4 cup of raisins, that's going to be 33 grams of carb, which, as I mentioned, I know you had some education in the hospital. Just to kind of refresh your memory, 1 carb serving or 1 exchange, we say, is 15 grams of carbohydrates. So if I had a 1/4 cup of raisins, that would be 2 carb servings. 2 exchanges means the same thing, okay? So that's what I want you to focus on with the label. Now, depending on what your provider says, they'll give you usually a carb goal per meal or servings. It looks like you wrote here that your provider wanted you to stick to 3 carbs per meal. So I always tell people to think about that as well, like almost like dollars or money. You have $3 to spend at a meal. You can pick to spend that money however you like, as long as you try and stay kind of in the budget. So in this example of the raisins, if I had a 1/4 cup of these raisins, that's going to eat up 2 of my dollars. So that's going to leave me with $1 more for the meal. So that's kind of a good thing to keep in mind when you're reading labels. This goal for you is the 3 carb servings, the 45 grams. It will make sense to you now if you look at the total carbs and think, oh, okay, how many dollars or servings is this going to cost me for the meal? Now, one thing that people get very confused about is you'll notice here on the top where it says serving size, 1/4 of a cup, it says 40 grams next to it. That is not the carbohydrates of the raisins. That's actually the weight if you were to measure it on a food scale. That can get so confusing. I know. I wish they would write it differently. So remember, serving size is usually written in cup or tablespoon. Next to it is typically the weight. All the way on the bottom is total carb, 33. Okay? So this would be 2 servings in this example. So let's practice another one. I know that's kind of a lot of information. So I have another one. We have some tortillas here. Now we're going to turn it over. And what are we going to look at first? We're going to look at serving size. So this particular tortilla says serving size is 3 tortillas. Okay. And if we go all the way down to total carb, it says 25. So that means if I had 3 of these corn tortillas, that's 25 grams, very close to 2 servings, right? Remember, 1 serving is 15. So this is right around 30. We'll round up. So 3 of these would cost me $2 or be 2 servings, 2 exchanges. It all means the same thing. Now, I will say that just so you know, because when I looked at these, I thought the label was a little odd. These are considered extra thin. That's why each tortilla is about 8 grams of carb versus the 15, which is pretty normal. So that's why it's important to check labels, right? Because you can see that if I wouldn't have checked the label, I would have thought this was just a regular corn tortilla, but it's actually an extra thin one. So remember, you just look at total carb and then go all the way down to the 25 grams. And you'll see that this is about, like I mentioned, 2 carb servings. So the way that you could make this a meal would be if you added in something like turkey meat, lettuce, salsa. Those would not count towards your carbs, and that would be a good meal. You could add in a side salad, baby carrots, jicama sticks. Those would all be low carb foods to add in as well and make it balanced for you to have with your tacos. So we'll just do this other product that I haven't actually tried yet myself, but I thought was kind of fun. So this is a cheese wrap. Now, if we turn it over, we check the serving size first. Remember, it says 1 cheese wrap is a serving. Okay, then we go all the way down to total carb, and it says there 1 gram. So this is considered a low carb food, right? Anything less than 5 grams of total carb, we typically say is low in carbohydrates. So you might think like, wow, I can eat an endless amount of these, and I don't have to worry about my carbs, right? It's not going to count towards my budget. In a sense, that's true. But remember this, you had mentioned that you wanted to work on the weight loss. So one of these is 160 calories. A normal whole wheat flour tortilla is about 110, okay? And because this is made from cheese, it does have a fair amount of fat. Not that fat is bad, right? But eaten in excess can cause weight gain, I should say. So if you had one of these for your taco night, that's okay to do. But remember that I don't want you having an excessive amount of these because you're thinking it doesn't have any carbohydrates. Cool, I can eat as many of these as I want. It's all about the balance of the plate. But this would be a good alternative to have if you wanted to do 2 of these, for example, or even 3, and then 1 of these as well, instead of something like chips or another tortilla, right? So kind of being balanced in that sense. But yes, reading nutrition labels can be complicated. Just really focus on the serving size and the total carbohydrates in there. Now, I get a lot of people who ask about fiber. If you look at a label, you'll see the fiber written on there as well. So let's go back to this one. For example, the corn tortilla says that there's 3 grams of fiber. Now, some products, if you look at a lot of Atkins products, for example, or a lot of the low carb products that are out there now, there'll be something written on the front that has a little circle that says net carbohydrates 2 or 3. And you think, wow, this is a really low carb food. There really isn't any carbohydrates in here. If you turn the label over, what they tend to do in those products is they'll take out the entire amount of the dietary fiber. And it's not recommended to take out the fiber unless it's more than 5 grams. So if the dietary fiber says 5 grams or more, you can take half of that away from the total carb. So this only has 3 grams, meaning I would leave the 25 grams alone. The net carbs can get kind of complicated. It's not something that's regulated by the FDA. So that's why a lot of those products like the Carb Smart ice cream, or like I mentioned, some of those low carb bars can kind of say that that's the net carb. So always make sure that you check the label on those products, because it can be really difficult to understand what they're trying to claim on the front of the package. So always be aware. But that's a really good question about labels. And your last question was about glucerna. And I actually have some here. So I will say that there are a lot of different types of shakes that you can purchase now. There is glucerna. There are also other brands that are available out there. The most important thing, like I touched on already, is really that you read the label for the product, okay? This one in particular is called Glucerna Protein Smart. There are different types, like I mentioned, so you want to make sure that you check the label to see if you're selecting one that kind of works for you. Now, depending which one you pick, I will say this first. Any kind of nutrition shake isn't necessary. You don't need to have one of these to have good control, but it can be a good snack or meal option depending which one you select. So for example, this particular protein one, if we look again at the label, which we've already practiced, the serving size is 1 carton. Okay, so it'd be just one of these Tetra Paks. And then if you look at the total carb, it has 7 grams. So that's going to be about half of a carb serving. Based on your medication regimen and what you're currently doing, this is okay to have for a snack, I should say. This would be a good choice. It's low in carbohydrates and also has a lot of protein. It has 30 grams, which is a very high amount. So it'll keep you full. So you could have this as a snack. That would be fine. If you were having a really busy day and you were going to run out of your house, you could also do one of these as a meal replacement, knowing that you weren't going to eat until snack time or lunchtime later. The thing that I see that people kind of run into issues or have questions about is you want to be careful not to have your regular meal and like my taco night, for example, and then have my glucerna with it as well. This really should act as a replacement depending on when you're having it, or should act, like I mentioned, as a snack if you're selecting one that's lower in carbohydrates like this one is. You can also consider making a shake at home, but this one in particular, like I said, does have a low amount of carbohydrates. There are others that have 15 grams, which is a serving, up to like 25. So it just really depends which one you pick to kind of, help guide you as to how you want to use that. But yes, you can incorporate this into your diet. Just be careful of how you use it and make sure you select one that is going to be on the lower carb side, like this particular Protein Smart one is a good choice. So I know we went through a lot of different information today. Let's just kind of summarize the 4 different topics that we really touched on. So the first one that we talked about was weight loss. That's a big concern. So just to summarize that, remember that really for the weight loss, I would say the biggest thing is to focus on getting those non-starchy vegetables in with your meals, especially the lunch and dinner. So remember, you don't have to change what you're eating from what your family is doing. Consider adding those in. That would be things like bag salad, baby carrots, Brussels sprouts, anything like that would be fine to add in. Another tool you can kind of use would be to consider doing the tracking, like we had kind of touched on a little bit. That can help you kind of identify where you can make some changes with your eating as well for the weight loss. The second topic we discussed was activity. So with the activity, remember the most important thing for that is that you really find something that fits in your schedule and that you enjoy doing. It can just be a walk around the block like we had talked about. It doesn't have to be anything like biking or anything intense. It can be something simple that works for you. Think about when you can carve that into your schedule, and that's going to help you be able to sustain an activity goal. The third one we talked about was the labels. Remember, with the labels, you really want to focus on first checking the serving size and then looking at the total carbohydrates of that serving size. And remember, the total carb is in bold, and 1 carb serving, 1 exchange, is 15 grams of carbohydrates. That's what you'll be seeing on the labels, and if you look up something in the diabetes literature, you'll also see that referenced often. So keep that in mind when checking labels, always important. The last thing we talked about was Glucerna. Remember that these are okay to use. They're not necessary to have good control, but they can be a good snack or a meal, depending which one you select. Like we said, you've got to make sure you check the label to kind of make sure you make a good choice for yourself. I know we went through a lot. Thank you so much for coming today. I can see that you're motivated to make changes. You had excellent questions. I appreciate you coming, and I will see you back in about 2 months.